you like these kind of far out there ideas. How do you like this idea? There's a group of people that say that dragons were real, and I'll explain.
Ooh.
So around the same time period, so to speak, and I'm not one of these people, so I'm probably going to get the details wrong
like
a little
Matthew
bit.
McConaughey movie right now.
Yeah, seriously. But so around the same time period in China, South America, Africa, all these different Rome, all these places, images depicted people fighting dragons, right? And every dragon was slightly different, but it was all a giant scaly animal that could fly. So when you break that down, you think about the fact that large birds had a hard time being fossilized because their bones are so porous, right? So because they have like hollowish bones, they break down very easily and they don't fossilize. So the group that says this, basically they're saying the evidence is the reason there's no fossils of dragons is because they had bird bones and they were actually very delicate animals. But a handful of these small population of these giant flying lizards existed and basically encompassed all these different countries where they all depicted fighting dragons in their own way, and they were all killed off by knights or whatever it is, and then didn't fossilize.
What?
So it's like the science is saying that if there were lizards big enough to fly around and eat people, they didn't have bones that could fossilize.
So it'd be like an eagle.
Right. And that's why all these human populations around the world have depictions of them, because they did actually exist.
In 2004, in South Dakota, 3 amateur paleontologists discovered an ancient skull. Nobody could immediately tell what animal it belonged to, so the finding was handed over to the Children's Museum of Indianapolis, where it collected dust for 2 years. Despite all attempts to determine its owner, experts couldn't confirm the skull's relation to any known animal species. Young visitors of the museum named it Dracoryx hogwartsia because it looks very similar to a magical Harry Potter creature. Bizarre outgrowths on its skull fuel debates between scientists, make them wonder what kind of animal it really is. But most experts agree it's a baby animal. At the same time, judging by the size of the skull, the creature had to be at least 3 meters long. Just imagine how huge it was going to be as an adult. Furthermore, in 2017, a complete skeleton of a similar beast was found in China. Meanwhile, in Alaska, experts found one of its feathers. But the most unbelievable thing is that these animals quite possibly lived alongside our distant ancestors, who even depicted them in art. Petroglyphs found in Canada and the US prove that. But what are these animals? Could they really have roamed the land a long time ago?
Hey, you know what? The Bible talks about dragons. And that right there should grab people's attention. It actually talks about dragons significantly in the Old Testament, not just one book, but all over throughout the Old Testament. So when the Bible speaks of a creature as being a real creature, we need to take notice.
That's right.
So let's dive into this. Let's jump into dragons. Let's look at them in a little bit more detail.
Yes, let's start off here, Bodhi. Why do so many people in our culture today believe dragons are just mere fantasy? Where is that coming from?
I think the primary reason is we don't find them. I mean, that's happened over and over again. When you look historically, if people couldn't find anything, they just thought, oh, it's a myth. Yeah. And, we started to see trends like this. For example, there was the dodo bird. And there's these ancient accounts where people would see these dodos, these sailors would stop by and kill them, harvest them for meat and take off. And so there's all these accounts of it, but when people started showing up there later on, they're like, we don't see any.
Yeah, a few hundred years ago, they thought the dodo bird was a myth because, number one, they were strange creatures. Number two, no one could find them. And number three, they only existed in these old stories and drawings. Kind of sound familiar? Does it kind of parallel the dragons?
Today we're going to do a little dragon head study. What it is that the geology is not correct, because this is not just rocks. And that's what they see. They say, oh, it's just a geological upheaval, plate tectonic, lava flow. Obviously. All I have found is biology. And I have found the mud fossils, which it changes everything. It changes geology, it changes biology, because they don't understand how these things converted into solid creatures. And it's nucleophilic substitution, which your body is doing right now, otherwise you would die. Every molecule in your body is unstable and continuously being refreshed, and that's called nucleophilic invasion. Substitution. They bring in new stuff, they take the old stuff out. Now, And that's what happened in these floodwaters, and they were hot floodwaters, and this was recorded by Velikovsky. There's not a single culture on the face of this planet that doesn't talk about dragons, monsters, giants. Why would they all do that? And especially with the evidence. Look at this. Isn't that something? Isn't that gorgeous? Somebody put a lot of work into these things. All right, this I think is a dragon's eye. You see all these little layers here? At first I thought it was a tendon ball, but they normally don't have that many layers. I think that is a dragon's eye. It's a mine in the United Kingdom.
In Canada, experts found a petroglyph made by the indigenous tribe of the Anasazi over 2,000 years ago. It depicts a creature resembling a giant lizard. An image of a similar reptile was seen in the San Rafael Swell, Utah, only this time it had wings. That rock art was created by one of the indigenous tribes around 4,000 years ago. If you examine it closely, you'll notice that the creature on this petroglyph had an elongated head, massive membranous wings, and clawed feet, which makes it look like some unknown dinosaur species. On top of that, there are other findings indicating that ancient humans met such animals not just once or twice. For example, the Ica stones. In 1966, Dr. Javier Cabrera Darquea received an engraved stone as a gift from his friend. The motif of the stone was some type of an extinct fish. Since Cabrera had a keen interest in prehistoric items, he started searching for such stones and buying them. As a result, his collection came to number more than 15,000 pieces. Among other things, these stones depicted creatures fairly similar to dinosaurs. Moreover, on one of the stones, you can see a human sitting astride this animal. That is absolutely impossible because people appeared after dinosaurs had died out. Therefore, it had to be some other beings that looked like giant reptiles. The authenticity of these stones has been repeatedly questioned. Although collector Santiago Agurto Calvo reported that he'd personally found such artifacts during excavations around the city of Ica. According to him, he found 2 items in tombs erected by pre-Hispanic cultures. Besides, stories about lizard-like beasts that terrorized our ancestors are present in the folklore of many various nations. Mentions of giant long-tailed or even winged reptiles with large teeth can be found in myths all around the globe. Even the Bible slipped them in. When reading it, we learn that on the 5th day of creation, God made great sea beasts and flying creatures. The word used to denote these animals translates from Biblical Hebrew as a dragon. If we believe the sacred text, humans used to be their neighbors. Maybe they even boarded Noah's Ark and survived the flood. But references to dragons don't only appear in the Bible. Gilgamesh, a hero of ancient Babylonian mythology, killed an enormous dragon named Humbaba guarding the gate to the cedar forest. In an Anglo-Saxon epic poem, Beowulf ripped out Grendel's arm to get this dragon's claw.
This crowned dragon, it's actually depicted on a lot of coat of arms associated with regions of France, and these are just a few of them up top. And I'm just showing, this is, I think, a port city, but it's shown in publications, and this is another township or commune, and this is the area in France, but they're all depicting this crowned, what really is a dragon, but we're being told it's a salamander. But there must be a reason for the deception, but it shows up in a lot of places. And there's even something called a lindworm, which is a giant serpent-like monster from European folklore. And it goes by a few different spellings. But you can also see, this giant serpent-like monster breathing fire as well. And it's also on these coats of arms. And an archaeologist from the 1800s has described it as basically a dragon without wings. So there's a lot of depictions of things showing up on coats of arms that may be dragons or claim to be dragons, and I just wanted to mention a few of those. And something else here I wanted to mention, there's another crowned serpent that is associated with, I think, Milan in Italy, and it's linked to this family, the mythical origins of this Visconti coat of arms, and it shows this, what looks like a serpent, and it's a crowned serpent, and it seems to be swallowing somebody, and it's also on the Alfa Romeo logo, but it's this referred to as the Biscione. It's a snake symbol often associated with Milan wearing a crown, and it represents this powerful ruling family, this dynasty in Milan, who use this snake as their symbol. So just a lot going on with crowned serpents and dragons, and here are some depictions of it in and around Milan, Italy. And I guess the former Prime Minister of Italy, Silvio Berlusconi, one of his residences, he's got this crowned serpent depicted on his lawn, apparently. So just a lot of interesting things seem to go back to Italy, France, and
In the Travels of Marco Polo by the famous explorer, you can find descriptions of long snakes with short clawed hands. However, if anyone gave dragons most of their attention, it must have been the Chinese. In this region, parts of reptiles' bodies were used as medicine or even food. As for European culture, it also has its share of dragon myths. In addition, you can often see these beasts used as heraldic symbols. But even though studying legends and ancient art is exciting, having actual physical evidence is a whole different thing. As you might guess, if folk tales were the only proof of the existence of dragons, I wouldn't be telling you all this. In 2017, residents of the Chinese village of Zhangjiakou stumbled upon a very peculiar thing in a field. That was the skeleton of an unknown animal, and nobody had any idea where it could come from. The thing reached 18 meters in length and consisted of many segments. It had 2 disproportionately small arms and a skull resembling that of a cow. Some superstitious villagers firmly believed they saw the remains of a real dragon. They were so scared to desecrate the thing that they didn't even dare touch the skeleton. The rest of the locals, however, didn't hesitate to straddle it and take photos. Zhangjiakou officials made no comment on the discovery and didn't send the remains for scientific analysis. Eventually, everyone concluded that the skeleton was a movie prop, even though no one could tell what movie it was. The future fate of the finding is unknown because it just disappeared. And it would be the right decision to forget the whole story and agree it was just a prank if similar things weren't found in other parts of the world, too. In 2021, in the Australian state of Queensland, scientists unearthed an ancient skeleton fragment that belonged to a flying creature with a 7-meter wingspan and a meter-long skull. On top of that, both the upper and lower jaws contained 40 teeth. I bet you wouldn't fancy meeting this beast face to face. Archaeologists believe that the neck of this animal was incredibly long, while the body was compact. Most likely, that was a rare species of flying reptile called Anangara. They lived about 112 million years ago and presumably fed on fish. In any case, their jaws were clearly made to catch prey. They were the first vertebrates that learned how to fly. And even though scientists suggest that Anangara inhabited all the continents, finding their remains is nearly impossible. Throughout all of history, archaeologists have discovered only skeleton fragments, mainly jaws. But the strangest and most interesting feature common to the species is a big palatal ridge on the upper and lower jaws. According to one version, those ridges helped Anangara maintain balance while flying. In addition, scientists admit that this feature really makes them very similar to mythical dragons. Furthermore, there's a finding serving as indirect proof that these animals could have existed at the same time as mammoths, and perhaps even humans. When John Reeves was working with another mammoth tusk around 10 years ago, he couldn't have predicted that he was about to find something that would overshadow everything he'd discovered before. This gold miner owns a parcel of land called the Boneyard. It's situated in Alaska, where, due to permafrost, remains of the Pleistocene fauna are preserved in pristine condition. The region's climate is favorable enough to let both bones and soft tissues survive through the eras. After mammoth tusks are extracted from the ground, they need to undergo restoration. The fossils are left to dry with hose clamps on so that they won't crack and deform. Unsuspecting, John was busy attaching clamps to yet another tusk that had been taken from a depth of around 20 meters, when suddenly something unbelievable happened. Right inside the tusk, the gold miner saw a blue feather. How could it have gotten there in the first place? Reeves was stunned beyond belief, as he'd spent years building up his rare collection and never encountered anything like that. He calls this feather the most remarkable item he's ever found, although paleontologists say there were no birds with blue feathers in Alaska during the Ice Age. At the same time, John's treasure is so small that it can't even be carbon tested, as this procedure will simply turn the feather into dust. This little thing may be a key to unraveling the mystery of the creatures currently known only as folklore characters. But let's imagine that dragons did exist. How real could they be from a biological perspective? Could those giant reptiles do all the stuff they do in the legends?